morning, good afternoon, or a good evening, wherever you are on this pale blue dot that we all live on. My name's Adam-Antium, you're the audience, and you're listening to this edition of ATZM Podcasts, the August edition, to be precise. I'd like to thank you all from the very bottom of my being for clicking in, as it were, and entertaining these original thoughts and some advocated thoughts on my behalf. Really appreciate everyone clicking in. But just the usual announcement for those of you listening to this on YouTube right now, my podcasts also exist on talkshoe.com. Down below in the video description you'll find the link to the Call series, as it's called, and there you can listen to and download the MP3 files of the full MP3 files for these podcasts free of charge. So those of you who want to do that there, and you can then sync them up with your iTunes or download them onto a little MP3 player or whatever. I have some of the people who listen to my show listen to their podcast while doing the household chores, so interesting. But yeah, you can do that there. The usual plug that I normally give is for the Zeitgeist Movement Defined, and this is actually a book that the Zeitgeist Movement has released to the public to basically explain in an extensive format exactly what it is the Zeitgeist Movement actually advocates. For those of you who want to get hold of a physical copy, you can do that through the zeitgeistmovement.com/orientation, and also you can download a PDF version of it for free. So, it's just for those of you who want to actually get a physical book. Then, I think they're selling it through Amazon and Lulu.com, I think. But you can find out about all that there. That'll extensively explain what the Zeitgeist Movement advocates. But just to put it into a single sentence, as I like to put it, the Zeitgeist Movement advocates the application of the scientific method to social and environmental concern, meaning that we integrate the methods of science into our ways of thinking to provide for humanity at a high standard of living and be efficient and also respect the biosphere itself. But that's, in a nutshell, what we advocate, and it's done through a sort of like a chain of regional chapters where people are active on the local level, doing events, screenings, presentations, street activism, even charity work. It's not the ultimate focus of TZM to just be a charity, because we recognise that charities are really evidence that the system itself doesn't work. So creating a system that doesn't need charities, that's essentially the ultimate goal of TZM. Really to create the conditions where the Zeitgeist Movement wouldn't even need to exist anymore. That's really, in a sense, TZM is a real anti-institution, that its ultimate goal is to not to have to exist anymore. But yeah, just some more announcements for those of you in or around the Brighton and Hove area. TZM will be holding an information stall at the Brunswick Festival. For those of you who know what the Brunswick Festival is, it's just a small sort of like a family festival that's held in Brunswick Gardens in Hove, and it's always a really, really nice atmosphere. There's sort of like jugglers. There's a band there with there's a stage there where bands can play on. It's always a lot of fun. So we're going to be having an information stall there. I'm anticipating that it's going to be really, really awesome because Brighton and Hove, they're culturally the stereotype of Brighton is that it actually cares for the environment, that it's green, and people who live in an alternative lifestyle, let's just say, would be normally attracted to Brighton, right? Well, how come it's only just recently when me and Jess from the Brighton chapter have been really actually energising a Zeitgeist Movement chapter down there? There's been a massive sort of crisis in a lot of culture in general of a lack of entitlement to change the world. But that's a side issue that I've gone on about in previous podcasts. I think I talked about it a little bit on my Z-Day review. But yeah, that stall's going to be pretty cool. I've actually put quite a bit of my own money into this, in buying all the necessary gear. I mean, I've just yesterday I actually had a 4 foot by 1 foot banner sorted out for the stall, along with some other bits and pieces. So it's coming along, and it's things like this that, as long as you've got the means and the opportunity, then I dare say there's a hell of a lot of Zeitgeist movement activists who would be a hell of a lot more motivated if they had, more access to the means and the opportunity to get out there and get involved. But that's something that I can, touch on later on. There's also one more announcement, even though, it's actually coming up to it, even though there hasn't been, I don't think, any major official announcements about it, but coming up soon, in the next month or so, is going to be the Zeitgeist Media Festival. So if you are in an area where maybe there's quite a few socially conscious artists, whether they're musicians, painters, comedians, filmmakers, whatever, right? See if you can gather some of these people together for like a small sort of like showcase of socially conscious art. That's really what the Zeitgeist Media Festival is about. That, as well as there's always a resource drive of some kind, whether it's a food drive or a clothes drive, maybe even a blood drive. Then again, I'm not entirely sure if that's possible to do, because there might be some like legal stuff you have to deal with on top of that if it's blood. But yeah, that's the idea, because really the kinds of messages that we have to put forward to change the world have to be transformative on many levels, because human beings they can be appealed to on many different levels. Mostly the approach that the Zeitgeist movement has used more or less since the beginning is predominantly an intellectual approach, where it's presenting information, and there is a little bit of emotional appeals in there sometimes, because we recognise the gravity of the situation and the necessity to maybe push a little against the barriers of indoctrination that a lot of people have. Sometimes just information by itself, it just stands there in front of someone's barricades of indoctrination, and nothing really happens. Sometimes there has to be a bit of a drive forward, because I dare say some people it's sort of like a self-defense mechanism, where people put up walls, not necessarily to hold off any invader, but just to see, is this person going to be put off by the fact that I have put barriers in their way, or are they going to actually try to push forward? Because a lot of people, they do receive a good determination, as long as it's not too pushy. They perceive that as, we call that passionate, right? And especially if you're the right kind of person in a social circle who, if you have a lot of social proof, then, some people are more likely to take your communications and maybe consider them, because, we've dealt a lot of time in our evolutionary development as small like groups and tribes, and there's hierarchy does develop. So there is still sort of like evolutionary wiring, as it were. It's a very bro science term, but or it might be the right term, I'm not sure. But yeah, sometimes people relate to people who have more certainty, where their credibility is not really. It's not if their credibility is stable, then we're more likely to sort of take their beliefs on. And if we're also appeal to on an emotional level as well, that can also sort of get us from another direction. It's almost like a pincer approach that's used in certain battles. You come at your enemy from different points, and you're able to sort of inject these ideas in, while also entertaining them, but not. It's really imbuing people and presenting ideas to people without having to force the idea or to impose the idea, because any idea that needs force in order to be considered is not really worth considering, because if it was worthy enough for consideration, then it would be self-evident. It would only take certain amounts of explanation due to maybe its foreign nature to the current way of thinking. Like, for example, the train of thought that the Zeitgeist movement advocates. That's very foreign to the predominant thinking of a society which has spent all of its time up until more or less this point living with real scarcity and seeing the world through the eyes and through the narrow-minded view of seeing things just as a monetary paradigm. It's very foreign to that sort of thing. So there's a lot of time a need to explain what it isn't before we can start explaining what it actually is, and that's a pitfall that a lot of TZM activists can easily fall into, when there's a person in front of you who, instead of asking questions about what it is, they're asking, is it something that it actually isn't? So you're having to say no, and you're having to explain why it's not what they have thought that it actually is, when in fact it's not. It can get a bit confusing as well, because one tendency that human beings can have when they're not really sure of what to say in any situation is they can try and they can bounce around sometimes. They go, oh, but what about this? And then what about this? And what about this? And completely unrelated things, because they're really scrambling. And the idea is to not make people feel like they should scramble, but if they do, just happen to react in a scramble, then we should address the situation and say, look, I'm not attacking you or anything. I'm just providing this information, because some people, without even recognising it, and maybe not even would not normally intend to do this kind of thing, will sometimes react highly irrationally and very defensively. So care has to be taken whenever communicating about foreign ideas. But anyway, there's that. On to the sponsorship situation, I'm afraid, and it's my unfortunate task to inform you that Tinted Spec Saviour is now no longer our sponsor, since an effort on behalf of unnamed hacktivists have put them out of business. Said hacktivists were reported to have been tampering with the database that the shade filters are programmed by, in addition to rewriting their hypnosis CDs. The resultant condition, as you can imagine, was highly unanticipated. People wearing them instead of only seeing them through the world, only seeing the world through the context of that colour's bias and being conditioned to justify it, people unbelievably started seeing the objective reality about that particular thing. People wearing the green shades started seeing the way the monetary system really worked. Those with the red-blue combo saw how politics really works. It was quite the lively afternoon in Piccadilly Circus. I mean, people's reality melting in front of their eyes. You can understand the reaction on behalf of the anti-terror police that the tinted Specsaviour to be held responsible and all business ties severed. Since then, the CEO hasn't been returning my calls. I mean, they've even blocked me from their Facebook page. So this podcast is brought to you by Desert Island Digs, an interesting new approach to real estate. Now, we hear all the time about how we have development problems here on the mainland, that we're piled up on top of each other and landmass cannot carry said population without massive imports of resources. Essentially, this is an estate agent that deals with the networking of and small scale development of dwellings on desert islands. Through the use of smart tunnelling, there's a small elevator shaft connecting the hub on the mainland with each desert island. Once the dwelling is constructed, there's an opportunity for a small number of people to live there rent-free. You'll have to take care of and send back down the pipe any shipwreck survivors, pirates, failed migrants, and so forth. But that doesn't sound like a bad way to live, you know. So go to www.didigs, and that's DIDIGGS.com for more info. And if you click on the button that looks very much like a boob, you can enter the code name Adam2015, and you'll be added to their VIP list, which gives you the first peek, you know, at new locations that they've got hold of. This podcast is also brought to you by our trusted triad of sponsorship, providing the points of preservation for this podcast and all its glory, so it can come to you free of charge every single month. The triad at the moment still consists of Russell Brand, Caroline Lucas MP, and Sir Patrick Stewart. They've all agreed to sort of co-sponsor this podcast in exchange for, at the end of their donation cycle, that they'll come onto this podcast for at least 10 minutes and discuss science and sustainability when applied to society. So that's the obligation that they've agreed to. Cheers very much, guys, for sponsoring the show, and I encourage everyone listening to actually tweet, email, smoke signal, text, whatever you got to do to thank these individuals for sponsoring the show and keeping it running. I mean, the more of us that actually thank these individuals, the more likely they will be to come onto the show and have a chat with us about science and sustainability when applied to society. Now, enough of the announcements, folks. I mean, we're already like nearly 20 minutes in. So, the topic of this particular show, I've decided, is going to be another miscellaneous Q&A podcast. This is actually round 9 of the Q&A that I've been doing. Understandably, by this point, I've actually addressed similar questions quite a few times over. However, I've found I don't actually mind going over them from time to time, since over time I have more of a different and revised answer. So by asking the questions, guys, you're actually helping me learn, and you're hearing me learn as I go. So it's all cool. There's one more thing that I've noticed. That I mean, as I've been going through and reading these questions and really trying to understand what they're actually asking and what kind of answers will satisfy, I've realised that these are not the kind of questions that plague the minds of the average person in an active fashion, you know, or at least in a active conscious fashion. Because, I mean, sure, we all from time to time entertain a momentary thought of why the world is the way it is, but those thoughts, oftentimes are soon stifled by years of learnt backwards rationalisation. Layers upon layers of dogma that explains away the way it is and blocks any hope for things to change. but rather that things will steadily improve as long as we keep supporting the system, as long as we keep voting for a particular person, as long as we keep, putting our stuff in the recycling, as long as we as long as we do our bit. The world can change if we all do our bit, right? The reality is actually that that's not going to be enough, and we do need to do more. But this is what I'm going to come to. But as activists, we are continually reading and trying to answer these questions. We're continually recognising these questions and continually addressing them. This is becoming a familiar factor in the life of an activist, is answering these really grand questions. One of the questions that I'll get later on is sort of like a really grand scope question, and it's not really the sort of thing that the average person really thinks about much. Activists, on the other hand, do. We are the ones who are really having to deal with these massive questions, and not in terms of, okay, which politician should we vote for if we want da 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 da, or it's how do we do this? How do we create the means for everyone on the planet to have a higher standard of living? How can we it's really, it's understandable why some people think it's massively subversive to the system, which I suppose it is, but in the sense of outmoding the system, thinking, right, we know how it can be done better, so we're going to go ahead and do it. You can do what you want to do. We want to live sustainably. You don't have to do what we're doing, but we would like to live sustainably, all right? And we think you shouldn't be able to say whether we can or can't. But yeah, that's the idea. Activists are always having to tackle those kind of questions, and that's why sometimes it does feel like the burden of responsibility of changing the world squarely on your shoulders, when in fact it's not. But anyway, let's move on to these questions, shall we? Question 1. TZM has no idea or transition plan as to how an NLRBE could be brought about globally. This is a commonly voiced opinion, but is it a true statement? Okay, answer. In terms of a transition plan, that depends on how you define plan. I mean, if it's a concrete set of steps that all you have to do is follow, then such a thing cannot exist without the power of prophecy. If we can't see into the future, we can't make a concrete plan. However, we can analyse trends and extrapolate where those trends are pointing. That's really the closest thing we have to prophecy, is trend analysis. So since we recognise that we exist in an emergent reality, meaning that change, whether it's the transition of the seasons or change in our knowledge, paradoxically changes that constant. Any plan that we formulate has to be inherently dynamic in order to adapt along with the changes in the world. This is otherwise known as a scientific worldview. Not that you only focus on science, but rather that the scientific method is an integral part of how you think. It's also known as scientific literacy, to be literate in scientific thinking and apply those principles. You care about finding the truth. You care about revising old and outdated ideas and furthering personal and social growth. I mean, doesn't this sound extremely like what education is supposed to be? I mean, that's that's the very romantic notion that the whole educational paradigm, like, you know, state-run education, that's the romantic notion that is justifying that, saying that, you know, it's equipping people for the world and to well, no, in fact, it's just a way of producing wage slaves. You know, if the educational system actually wanted to push us forward as a species, then critical thinking, scientific literacy, you know, just an openness to new ideas, and not a taught sort of rejection of new ideas in favour of the current ones. You know, having that in the very foundation of the educational paradigm itself, that would be moving humanity forward. But that's not really done. It's really just teaching people, you know, how to be. Well, it's not even teaching people how to be a wage slave, because it doesn't teach anything like, you know, all the tax system and all that. And like when people have to start filling out tax forms, it's something that they've had to either look up on the internet or anything. They weren't taught it in school. If they ever learnt it while they were in school, it's because maybe someone else taught them. The school doesn't teach them, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, it kind of also sounds like what activism is supposed to be, moving humanity forward. So back to transition ideas or plans, however you wish to phrase it, we have numerous things we could look into and nurture to help elevate us out of needing this system, such as clean renewable energy mediums, which are currently, they're superior. However, they're currently having to be held back by, you know, patent restrictions, tax hikes, culture lag, among other factors. You know, things like vertical hydroponic or aquaponic farming tech can be used to help us out of this system, which, you know, it already has its own industry now. You know, if you check out, I think it's called Omega Garden, on their website, they actually claim to be the industry leader for I think it's hydroponic systems. I think it's hydroponics, or I think it's I think they probably do both aquaponic and hydroponic. But yeah, I mean, last time I looked, you know, they said they were the industry leaders. Like, there's an industry for this? Yeah. I mean, one of the presentations that the presentation I gave at Eastbourne was was sort of like a second iteration of my transitional thinking presentation. I actually did that in a shop that sold all the necessary bits and pieces that you needed to construct your own like aquaponic or hydroponic food rig. You know, it sold all the necessary parts and ingredients and everything you needed for it. I think the only thing it didn't sell was fish. But then again, I think there was probably about 5 different, you know, fish places in Eastbourne anyway. And also one of our most well-known activists, Douglas Millett, he started a company called CFS, Cybernated Farm Systems. You know, the objective for CFS is to design, build, and distribute fully automated aquaponic farming systems. You know, and you know, the aim of that is to directly alleviate world hunger in a sustainable and efficient way. And because they're fully automated, you know, the local residents will need to be shown how to supervise it and everything. But more or less, it won't really need much maintenance because it's built to last. You know, and it can just keep cranking out food, and they would only need to know how to supervise and, you know, replace parts just in case if they break or whatever. But yeah, I think these things are already being done. You know, there's the revolutions emerging in open source. You know, open source meaning that the designs in terms of physical objects, like the blueprint of particular schematics of different objects, or coding in terms of computer programs, are all open to the public, so you can utilize them and even improve, if you know how, for free. You can download a schematic for a particular tool, right? And this is being aided by further revolutions in accessibility to relatively new technologies such as 3D printing. If you even the average working class consumer having access to the means of production is not something new. As technology has progressed, so has our access to it. And the trends only point to us having more access to information and more access to resources in an open source format as time goes on. I firmly believe that looking into these, and if possible harnessing these things to alleviate our need for the system, is instrumental in our transition away from the current system. As Bucky Fuller said, you don't change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model, which makes the existing model obsolete. But the Zeitgeist movement and myself have covered this issue of the transition quite extensively. There's a radio show that I'll include the link for all these. Anything that I reference in this podcast, I'll see if I can find a link for it and include it in the description. But there's a radio show that Peter Joseph did called The Transition. There was a video by Oscar Gonzalez, and it was a video that he did for a pitch for a particular sort of like a transition series of ideas, sort of like almost like a transition plan, but not sort of like a dynamic plan. But you can find that out. I myself, I've done presentations on the topic. It's something that has been done extensively. But both to give insights into what ideas can be adopted in our dynamic shift away from needing money to an NLRBE, and also to explain why there can't be any such thing as a plan to be followed. In my second presentation on the topic, transitional doing, which I'll put a link for in the description as well, I liken the act of guiding humanity through this transition to blindly navigating a football field-sized, constantly shifting assault course. Without knowledge of the layout and patterns of the reconfigurations, that being knowledge of future events, such a plan can't be written. Here's the thing. We're already in the transition. Not just in the sense of TZM's existence and collective push towards sustainability, but also in the sense that our world, at least, is an emergent property. This is another reason why we need to transition, because the monetary system doesn't do too well with positive change. In fact, the inherent behaviour of the system stands in direct opposition to sustainability itself, to preserving life systems. But that's enough of that question. Question 2. Please bring up the subject of Anonymous, who is now advocating a global resource-based economic system. And this question also had a link to a video. It's an Anonymous promotional video, which I'll also link in the description. I must say I'm always pleased to hear that other people are on board with ideas similar or the same as those that TZM advocate. Why shouldn't it? It should feel good when you realise you got allies. I can't say I'm extremely familiar with Anonymous as a full entity, as it were, but I have met and known a few people who identify with its goals. I know the very idea of naming it Anonymous is a paradox, And, similarly, TZM operates with a few of those as well, as I'll explain later on. I mean, the very idea of living in a monetary system and using the monetary system to survive while working to become the value system of a post-monetary paradigm, that's a real tricky paradox. And, it's something that is, often used against us in a knee-jerk fashion. Well, you use money as well, but that's because, it's a paradox, because we're in this system. But anyway, but back to Anonymous. The term hacktivist is a word often used to describe them. And personally, I think it probably fits. I mean, there's a certain appeal and function to how the current system can be opposed on a brand new front that the establishment has never really had to deal with before, the digital front. This obviously throws up several new challenges, since the system itself wasn't designed in anticipation of such things like the internet and public accessibility to internet-capable technology, let alone the social and even cultural effects of such innovations. But I do like the attitude of Anonymous, though. The dogged determination. I really like that. That's something that's really lacking in the activist community. I mean, too many people are too passive in terms of their action, and a lot of people get frustrated that they're not achieving anything because they're not being active enough and determined and strong-willed enough. And that's one thing that Anonymous seems to have in buckets, is this confidence and just this determination to push it. I love that. But I'm not sure whether they're doing this particular thing already, but they could also serve as a huge sort of protective force for the online interests of people. I mean, protection of the internet itself is extremely important for all of us to engage in. But when I say the online interests of certain people, like for example, protecting the websites of people who provide counterculture. That's something that can be possible for so many people, since it requires certain amounts of skill in areas that we are even being taught in our educational system to a certain degree. We can sort of like use the knowledge that we get from the system to defeat the system. But I'm interested by the idea they've alluded to in the video, called an open source government. Maybe if anyone in Anonymous wants to get in touch with me and let me know what that entails, we could have a chat about, all that sort of stuff. And, I think that could make for an interesting future podcast. So if anyone from Anonymous wants to sort of like get in touch and, maybe we can create a show like, what is an open source government? Let's get into the details of it. If you guys have these details worked out, but that would be cool. But anyway, question 3: what level of critical mass do you think would be needed to start seeing a real shift? Well, there first needs to be a recognition of the phenomenon known as the tipping point. In terms of social change, an article I read by W. Chan Kim and Renee Mauborgne, I think it's Mauborgne or Mauborgne, I'm not entirely sure, I'm butchering the pronunciation, I'm sorry, on tipping point leadership, and I think what they wrote in this article, is pretty close to the mark. Quote: "The theory of tipping points, which has its roots in epidemiology, is well known. It hinges upon the insight that in any organisation, once the beliefs and energies of a critical mass of people are engaged, conversion to a new idea will spread like an epidemic, bringing about fundamental change very quickly. The theory suggests that such a movement can be unleashed only by agents who make unforgettable and unarguable calls for change, who concentrate their resources on what really matters, who mobilize the commitment of the organization's key players, and who succeed in silencing the most vocal naysayers. Now, obviously that sounds a little extreme. However, the principles still hold that the promotion of the new view must grow and defend against the natural reaction that the culture is going to have to it. I mean, a study conducted in this vein called Social Consensus Through the Influence of Committed Minorities. It was published on the 22nd of July 2011. I won't read you the people responsible for the study, because I'm not even going to try to pronounce their names. But you can find it. Just Google Social Consensus Through the Influence of Committed Minorities. But this study found that the tipping point where minority opinion quickly becomes majority opinion is 10%. 10% of the population. And to give another academic angle, it was slightly different though. It was there was a TEDx talk by Erica Chenoweth, and she the talk she gave in a TEDx Boulder event. It was called "The Success of Nonviolent Civil Resistance," and it was a very interesting video. A link to which I'll put in the description. But in this talk, she details the results of her study of the relationship between violent and non-violent civil disobedience. And her data revealed that non-violent efforts were far more effective and only required the sustained and committed support of only 3.5% of the population. Now, she does say that, granted, it may not sound like much, but 3.5%, I think she calculated in the US, that's about 11 million people. Now, the Zeitgeist movement across the globe I don't think it has something like 11 million active members. I mean, I don't think the active membership of TZM is anywhere near that. Maybe at a push, maybe a couple of 100,000 that are across the world that are actually active and not just going along with the system and not actively advocating it. But yeah, she says that that like 3.5% is the threshold, and when a non-violent movement attained this support percentage, it did not fail in its objectives. Once it gained 3.5, and all of those movements that did pass the 3.5% threshold were non-violent ones, right? And she actually shows, like her data shows, that if you ever wanted to make a social movement fail, it is to include violent approaches, and if you really want to make a movement succeed, you need to introduce non-violent approaches, But I'll include the link of that video in the description. But as a side note, this clearly flies in the face of what I have at least found to be one of the instant knee-jerk reactions to a proposal such as an NLRBE, that being, quote, "But how do you expect to convince every single human being to go along with this?" End quote. Well, first off, something to shatter that illusion straight away: no paradigm has ever required the informed consent of 100% of the population before it can be implemented. Okay, socioeconomic models were either introduced gradually over time, and we just went along with it since we were also increasing our standard of living in many respects, and everyone else was doing it. So there is a social pressure. Being social beings, it's easy for us to just follow along with the herd. But we have in that process we had been increasing our standard of living in many respects, or they were, alternatively, these paradigms were imposed with force. Now, either way, the majority just decides it's a good idea and everyone gets roped in as well. In the case of our transition to an NLRBE, hopefully people will gravitate towards it as it makes sense to them and is demonstrated to them. Those that value sustainability over consumption will choose to opt for more and more sustainable approaches as these ideas gain more ground. But coming back to the issue, a surprisingly small critical mass is actually required. You know, it's like I say that a virus doesn't need to infiltrate 100% of the cells in your body in order to kill you. No, in fact, some viruses are even evolve to primarily attack vital systems, because that's the most effective means of taking down an organism, is infiltrating it from within and shutting down its vital systems, which, considering what complex beings we are, and there's a lot of our functions that operate on many different scales, meaning, there's sort of like the human body, then there's the organs, then there's sort of like, down to the cellular. We operate on all these different levels, and with all these levels of complexity, and thus there's more opportunity for interactions in the between the being and the environment. And in fact, we're dependent upon the environment to survive. So sometimes we take in things that are harmful to us, and our body reacts. But yeah, I mean, as long as there is that small amount of critical mass that is actually needed. I mean, but as long as that number sustain their efforts, that's even what the central question is in the film The Matrix Revolutions, and the question that the film answers for us is, how do we get out of the Matrix? And the answer being that it is a sustained effort to move forward, having first learnt the what and then understanding the why. All right? So keeping it together as an activist and working on yourself to really become that better person and thus become that change we wish to see, that will be the focus of my next presentation that I'll be giving at the next Z-Day. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. Anyway, that's enough of that question. So question 4. Where do you see the Zeitgeist movement being in the next 5 years, and what do you foresee for the movement achieving in that time? What impact for positive change do you think can be measured? You see what I meant about all these questions being, sort of like, the big sort of like, questions about, our future and our purpose, and, the big questions. See what I mean? So, but yeah, in 5 years, I expect to see TZM on the ballot. Just kidding. Even though, it would certainly be interesting to see the money-free party on the ballot. I mean, for those of you who actually do think that politics is a viable avenue of social change, then the money-free party is just a ticket for you to support. For those of you who don't know, the Money-Free Party is an upcoming political party, actually, from the grassroots, but they wish to become an established and respected political party. And their aim is basically just a political version of the Zeitgeist movement. The aim is to move us away from needing money and to create a sustainable and efficient socioeconomic system. But how exactly they can achieve this via a political means, well, I'd be interested to see. I mean, if they got on the ballot, I'd definitely register to vote and start voting. And I'd vote for them. But in terms of what TZM will be doing, I'm interested to see whether the Global Redesign Institute will be in full swing by 5 years' time. I mean, Peter Joseph has said in prior radio shows that in the near future he intends to step back entirely from TZM and actually shift his focus, towards the GRI, Global Redesign Institute. And just a side note for those of you who aren't aware, the idea Peter has put forth for the Global Redesign Institute is to essentially take an analysis of a particular local area, and based upon the readings such as the physical shape of the land, the wind systems active in that region, mineral deposits and placement, quantity and variety of existing resources, and all the other variables required, to ask the question of how this area can be redesigned to carry its population at a high standard of living while also being efficient and respecting the ecosystem around us. I mean, it's similar to what Richard Buckminster Fuller once used to do. I think it was Bucky Fuller, who he did a thing called the World Game, where the challenge was to create a high standard of living for everyone, with the most efficient use of resources and the least negative retroactions, that kind of thing. But if you want to look that up, Richard Buckminster Fuller, the World Game, I think it's called. But so naturally there will need to be, coming back to the GRI, there will need to be the consideration of what is the best means of generating energy. For instance, if it's on or near the coastline, then wind is likely to be a more obvious and efficient choice. The shape requirements of the physical land may dictate that a certain configuration, like an actual configuration of a population centre, would be better than other configurations. I mean, there's this whole thing that where Jacques Fresco has designed circular cities, and and a circular city is provably more efficient for a configuration of a population centre, but loads of people don't really realise that that isn't the only kind of city structure that can be constructed. I mean, it's more efficient for like a flat piece of land where there's no sort of like mountainous regions or different interventions by massive seas or whatever, right? Sometimes the most efficient configuration might be a sort of like a C shape. You never know. But all this analysis and calculation of efficiency and freer living is then shown to the public with the aim of demonstrating what is possible in some graphical form. I mean, it would be awesome if this can be done with holograms. I mean, that would be awesome. But it's really just to showcase what is possible in each respective region. Because the examples that P. Joseph has given is of the Los Angeles area, because that's where he lives. But yeah, another thing is in recent months, Peter Joseph has announced that a 501c non-profit will be created to assist with certain aspects of the movement, such as chapter infrastructure, website administration, and event funding, and etc. But ever since the movement began, individual chapters and even individual activists have been self-funding TZM's efforts. With the 501c, chapter coordinators and event coordinators particularly don't have to worry so much about having to fund events, which a lot of times, are not cheap. Now, imagine, with that burden lifted, how many activists who wouldn't normally be able to get active because of monetary constraints now find they don't have to pay out the nose to get a chapter off the ground. How much more active are people going to become? Think about it. I mean, smaller chapters can get away with freebies like, pub function rooms for their events, but when you have a large chapter or a chapter with a larger reach, or, some sort of event which would be, louder or more lively, like for example, a media festival, then higher attendee numbers, or at least higher anticipated attendee numbers, means you need to hire a proper venue. And all this time, all these 7 years since TZM has started, we've all been funding this out of our own pockets. And considering we need to be going further, doing more, and growing, we're more or less we've more or less reached the threshold of what we can self-fund without having some sort of financial support. I mean, so one thing I will optimistically hope for in the next 5 years is a Zeitgeist Media Festival or a Z-Day event in a place like Madison Square Garden, some big venue with a mainstream press in attendance, and we all just have a blast, and a big after party as well. Yeah, that'll be awesome. But I mean, one thing the 501c also enables is a professional press relationship to be created. I mean, think about this. I mean, TZM has appeared on the media, and even mainstream media, numerous times, both in mention and with individuals being interviewed. I mean, RT News being the outlet that has allowed TZM to have a voice in the mainstream media quite a lot. Since I've lost count of the amount of times that Peter's been interviewed on there. We're already pushing through. We've achieved so much as a movement, and we've got on so many different places and spoken to so many different people about these ideas, and we haven't even had a professional press relationship. Now imagine how many shows TZM could get on when we finally have a professional press relationship with the mainstream. Part of the reason why so many media outlets wouldn't even go near us is because we've been, an outlier in terms of media. We've been sort of like it was considered like a fly-by-night sort of thing, not big enough to pay any attention to, sort of social entity, as it were, So I'd like to foresee different TZM activists, not just necessarily Peter Joseph, because Peter Joseph does want to step back. He doesn't want to be seen as the leader. He's got other things that he wants to get on with now anyway. So many different TZM activists on shows like, Real Time with Bill Maher, Larry King, the ITV's Tonight Show. Hell, you know what? I would happily do the Graham Norton show or the Alan Titchmarsh show if you were able to get me in the door. This is how willing I am. I've already been on BBC Radio 2 a couple of times. So I'm willing. But lastly, about just the last thing about the 501c. The creation of it can enable legal protection, and this will be extremely important when you consider the degree of attack and harassment that TZM has received even in its first 7 years. And we've been fortunate enough that it hasn't been bad enough to warrant large-scale legal intervention, partly because the people committed to attacking TZM are so small. And TZM doesn't really have large enough of a public profile yet to be considered anything near as the threat that the trolls make it out to be. But as TZM grows, then so will the culture's reaction to it. I mean, you've got to keep in mind that what TZM advocates is outside the frame of reference of the greater majority of society. In its efforts to show humanity where humanity can go to live sustainably, and understandably the culture will react with its own learnt defence mechanisms. I mean, if any of you have attended a TZM information stall, then you'll know exactly what I mean. So the importance of legal protection increases in tandem with the growth of the movement's membership and influence. I mean, Peter Joseph explained exactly why TZM is making this move in a previous global radio show entitled TZM 501c Non-Profit Review, which I'll also include a link for in the description. But as for the second part of your question, sorry to ramble on for so long, what impact for positive social change can be measured? Okay, that's a difficult one. See what I mean about these big questions. I suppose looking at the social consensus in a way would be helpful. I mean, if you go online and ask what kinds of things are being done to make the world a better place, I'm sure you'll be inundated with numerous approaches, philosophies, principles, innovations, and so forth. However, considering the overarching socio-economic model by its nature cannot allow them all to coherently take hold, since that would be to make itself obsolete, not only that, but too few of these ideas are unified in the sense of providing a congruent and sound direction to sustainability. These restrictions that both the monetary system and a lot of culture lag puts on it, this is why so many of these ideas haven't really taken hold. There's no real cohesion with these ideas. I mean, there's loads of awesome ideas that they're just not unifying enough. I mean, it's like a car trying to put itself together and failing each time to be able to drive itself out of the factory. I suppose maybe if there can be some way of getting a consensus from a march or protest crowd, I suppose that will be interesting. I suppose stand up there in front of them with a megaphone and see how many cheers you can get for each idea. I mean, like, write a list of ideas for positive social change and see how many cheers each idea can get. I suppose that could also help like-minded people who are unaware of each other in the crowd to be able to come together. I dare say whenever I went to a protest or march, there may have been other TZM people out there in the crowd, but I never spotted them. But yeah, someone do this and get it on video. I think that would be cool. But anyway, next question 5. What technical and educational infrastructure developments need to be in place before our society can give serious consideration towards outgrowing the monetary and political institutions entirely? Well, I'd say there needs to be some way of demonstrating what such a system can do for us. And more than just, making videos or even podcasts, we need to be maybe creating physical learning spaces where the technology we talk about is actually showing its ability to do what we claim it to do. The ideas put forward for both the Global Redesign Institute and I think it's called the Economic Safety Net Project. I think it might have changed its name, but I think it's the Economic Safety Net Project. It's by Dave Lucas. If you look up Dave Lucas on, he's one of our another one of our advocates. He gave a talk at Z-Day where he slightly alluded to this, but he was talking about the Third Industrial Revolution. But both of those sort of ideas, they're examples of how we can actually do this, and I'd recommend looking into them, seeing if you can help out. One of the problems we face is a general denial that the system is at fault, and solving this issue is going to take a little more than just voting or even mass protests. People who suffer under this system are tragically in the best position to show what is wrong with the system However, that doesn't necessarily prime them to recognise that, let alone be motivated to seek what system would be right. Because that is where we come in. Not just to inform and reassure, but also to help in any way we can. I mean, we in TZM talk a lot about becoming the change we want to see. So let's see the changes we're becoming. Okay? There's not enough people showing how it's done. You know, I mean, there's currently more people making content online, and I'm mainly talking about YouTube here, out of their own mental experiments on the journey to emotional and social maturity. You know, it becomes a strange form of time-wasting artwork that has millions of views for each video. You know, it's almost like we've become culturally obsessed with misguided and incomplete thoughts, and we attack considered and well-rounded thoughts. You know, it's no wonder why it's a total bee-hutch to change the world. But unfortunately, you know, there are a lot of, you know, you build it, then we'll come kind of people. So showing what is actually possible, you know, in some form where the public can go, oh, all right, that is what we can do. So why aren't we doing it? You know, I think that is a great thing to do. Anyway, question 6, and I'm paraphrasing here, but what steps and progress has been made with TZM since its inception, and how has it been adapted to reach a larger number of people? Okay, well, TZM as a social movement which promotes scientific literacy, understandably, has always been seeking ways to improve our impact and our influence and our communication. I mean, as a result, you know, differing approaches and events and different principles have been incorporated into our repertoire, as it were. You know, from town hall meetings held by regional chapters to, you know, conference events which have been encouraging and inclusive to other parallel organisations and movements. From podcasts hosted by numerous individuals to information stalls held in many countries all over the world. You know, TZM has always been trying to, you know, almost in a sense, experiment with different approaches, and the approaches that you see us using today are the tried and tested methods that have brought us here. Since I think it was 2011, TZM has expanded even further upon the necessary artistic communication of this train of thought by beginning an annual Zeitgeist media festival where socially conscious art of all forms and media types is shared and experienced together, along with a resource drive of some form at each event. In recent years, the TZM challenge, that was an interesting thing. It was something that was done to invite anyone who could provide a substantial argument against the premise of the movement and what it aims to achieve. And in addition to a sort of written response, the person who provided the argument will be brought on also to the global radio show to have a chat and go through their argument and through the premise and have an open and respectful exchange about, you know, whether there's anything TZM can improve on, and, you know, and if so, you know, how do you think we will actually improve? In the last year or so, it has become clear that, as I mentioned earlier, that TZM is reaching the end of what it can easily accomplish by self-funding and having more of a loose, voluntary orientation of chapter management, since we've always steered clear of any idea of central leadership, instead promoting that each advocate lead by their own example of self-leadership. I mean, we've said for years that TZM is a leaderless movement, but at the same time, I mean, at least it's, you know, twigged in my mind that we're both a leaderless movement and a leaderful movement. So one thing, listening to the radio shows, it sort of really does reaffirm in your mind the kind of thoughts that you've been having, and the kind of directions that you're going. You see where other people have gone down these paths of reasoning, and other people who are even more experienced than you in being an activist. You can see where they've been going wrong, so you can think, I wouldn't necessarily need to learn trial and error absolutely everything, because in a sense we can stand on the shoulders of giants. But yeah, it's one of the things that I've learned through listening to other activists is that there is a strange paradox that it's a leaderless movement and a leaderful movement. But as a result, the idea of creating a 501c non-profit for TZM has been arrived at. This can enable so much more in terms of the connections that TZM can establish, such as with the media, legal protections, and means of being able to take donations for particular projects. This is something that that many who advocate TZM have fought against in our own values, since associations with the monetary system is one of the last things that we want. As I've explained, there are many paradoxes to being an advocate of positive social change. Unfortunately, we do have to use the system to end the need for the system. It can be done. It's not the only approach, but it's one of the approaches that should be used, at least, because a lot of people do sort of see that as a hypocrisy, but it's a paradox. You have to use money to kill money. But it's all a matter of how and why, and making sure that integrity is held. Unlike other 501c's, no one will be taking a salary. That's the thing. The transparency is also another reason for it. As Peter said, if you can't trust a small group of very well-intentioned individuals, then how can we expect to trust anyone to do anything? But as for coming back to the issue at hand, the question that I'm addressing, for more of an entertaining walk through TZM's history, our good friends Ben McLeish hosted a global radio show to showcase this. It's entitled Zeitgeist: The First 5 Years, and a link to which I'll include in the description. But anyway, on to question 7. In regards to the NLRBE, what has been brought about? Okay, nothing really substantial has been built in terms of infrastructure. However, I'd say it's debatable whether the gradual rise of off-the-grid living actually represents maybe a fetal stage of what the NLRBE could be in the physical world. If you look into exactly how extensive the spread of self-sustaining communities is across the globe, you'll actually see a vast number. Is surprisingly large. Imagine if all those communities started to network together online in a concerted effort to spread their influence on a large scale, in addition to shifting to a more high-tech approach. Imagine that. That aside, the internet itself already exists. That's a globally distributed network of instant communication. That is part of the puzzle. Linking that in with the off-grid communities, we already have the very basic skeletal infrastructure parts to get this going. One of the most pivotal points in our transition is when we start networking on a global level to coordinate the outmoding of the system itself. That will be, I think, when we really start creating the NLRBE. We really actually start creating the system in its physical sense. I mean, obviously there needs to be the values as well, but that's for a whole other topic. But anyway, question 8. What changes along the journey between where we are now and a sustainable paradigm can we expect? Yeah, see what I mean about the big questions? These are awesome. I love these questions. Okay, well, there's many great things that we can expect on the horizon. Some of them, whether we like it or not. You see, technology even progresses in spite of monetary restrictions. It's their application that is mostly the factor being manipulated by the requirements of the monetary system that is at the cause of technology not seeming to be for us but rather against us. It's one of the reasons why so many Hollywood films that paint dystopic futures about humanity being enslaved by machines. That has so much of an impact because there isn't a dominant influence in society that says technology is good for us and we should just let it do its thing. No, instead there's this, oh no, technology breaks all the time, so technology is not a viable option to actually use. Even though we do rely upon it's a strange sort of paradox that we even experience there. I mean, we unconsciously recognise that without technology, we would really just be living in the Stone Age. Probably less than the Stone Age, because even people in the Stone Age had sort of like rudimentary stone tools, and that is technology, right? No technology. That's lower than Stone Age living, but yeah, it's mostly that the monetary requirements of it that's steering technology in the direction that it's mostly going. That being to break, so that more money can be made from you selling more. But for instance, a system that requires infinite growth and infinite consumption and requires divisive, apathetic and self-interested values in its population, technology will mostly dominantly be used to serve those ends. That's the pitfall of any tool. When you use it for a task that it's not suitable for or not designed for instance, creating an atomic bomb to secure a safe society, you may achieve the result you're aiming for, but you will likely cause massive damage in the process, maybe even cataclysmic damage. The damage in this case being the very many ways that technology can hurt us. So we need to apply the right tools to the right tasks. It goes without saying that technology should be used for the raising of our standard of living, instead of being used to kill each other and by extension ourselves. We should be expecting more of both users of technology as time moves forward, not just because those with power will use their technological assets to defend their own agenda, but also that those who wish to improve the world with technology will still find a way to do so. There's so much opportunity and so many means to do things in so many different ways in this world now. This is why the internet should be used wisely and protected wisely. I think in the future we'll see more food banks, at least in the UK, crop up. More charities, more NGOs and other people coming to the fore, each with their own cause that they aim to address and even to solve. As a result, it will become harder and harder to maintain an illusion that the system is doing well, because the symptoms, just like with a chronically ill cancer sufferer, will become harder and harder to ignore. I think public pressure upon politicians will escalate, I think people will be asking questions with less tolerance of the bullshit that politicians think passes as an answer, and maybe there will be more acts of social commentary on behalf of celebrities. You know, there's always been like a certain small percentage of celebrities who do come out in the into the public and you know, and cite socially conscious views and bring socially conscious issues to the public's attention. But I think there will be more and more of that. I mean, you know, I don't think there would have been a person like Russell Brand maybe 20 years ago, because 20 years ago you had to really be in a or maybe 30 years ago, sorry, about 30 years ago you would have to really hold a position of authority and maybe high influence to be able to reach the amount of people that Russell Brand reaches now. You know, that's the brilliant thing about, you know, science and technology, that it's expanded our variety of means of being able to influence our environment. But I think there will be more pressure groups and social movements pointing their focus closer and closer to the root causes of our seemingly overwhelming problems. Almost like a growing immune response. You know, it's our immune response in terms of, you know, being our activism and our rejection of what the current system is doing to us that's hurting us. It is sluggish to get going, but that's mainly because we've spent so long thinking a certain way that it's difficult and even sometimes painful to think a completely different way, you know. But that is why I see just the attitude of activism itself being the urge to move things forward for the better as an extremely important element of our thinking. We will also, unfortunately, see a growth in the establishment's efforts to defend itself against what is essentially a gradual exodus away from the monetary paradigm as a whole, and as a result, away from their power structure and their chokehold. I mean, I suppose certain agreements can be made for those who wish to stay with the monetary system, while the rest of us opt for a better life elsewhere. But speaking seriously, it's hard to tell exactly what to prepare for, which is why a scientific approach to problem solving is so critical to us achieving a sustainable world. In a lot of ways, it's a value war on many fronts. You know, the clash between the values which support life and the values created to perpetuate the system. You know, it's like a game of chess played by two people sat across from each other. You don't just have the activity on the board to manage, but there's also the interaction between the players. You know, if we were to extrapolate that example to a societal scale, with the activity on the board being the physical reality and the players' interaction being the competing value systems, then an elaborate and interconnected process of social evolution is revealed. You know, I mean, which way it goes is all a matter of what the most dominant forces are. Right now, we're in a conflict between the forces of nature and the forces of infinite growth and consumption. Now, when it comes to the positive aims of humanity and the effort it requires to bring its aims to fruition, think about all the necessary individual disciplines and skills that are required to even stand a chance at winning. This is the necessity for variety in activist approaches. Because here's the thing. People mostly see activism in a narrow range of behaviours and values, and mostly the obvious ones, speaking on a megaphone, going to marches, whatever, right? So there's only a few. But in fact, the range is actually much broader than that. because, we are a social species and ideas are contagious. The very act of being a compassionate and moral human being is a form of activism. I mean, you are affecting the world in a positive way. The only trouble is that kind of thing is nowhere near as encouraged and well received as it needs to be. So anyway, question 9. How can things be steered towards a brighter future? Yeah. See what I mean? Big questions. To sum up in a single sentence, the dominant values and methods have to be shifted towards those that respect and align with natural law and raise the standard of living for everyone. In a lot of ways, the values inform and create methods, and also vice versa. This means that the transition isn't steered first with the proper values, then the methods to achieve a world based on those, and it isn't steered with first the physical infrastructure and then the values to nurture it. I mean, both shifts have to occur more or less simultaneously. For if we move forward with just values first, we would still be in the straitjacket of this anti-economic model, and as such, the values will keep dying like the frail confidence of a poor comedian. Likewise, if we were to move forward with just methods first, then we would most likely not properly respect it and sabotage our own prosperity to the point of destroying everything, all because of not feeling ready or entitled to such a way of life. This dual approach isn't so much a mandatory requirement, even though it certainly appears so in many arenas, but rather that it is the smoothest journey from where we are now to a sustainable world that I can think of. It seems to be the smoothest course to me. Speaking on a more pragmatic note, technology should be used to help create an access abundance, meaning that everyone has access to the means of life, meaning that we have access to the produce of fully automated facilities which crank out food, access to distribution systems which provide other resources such as clean water, equipment, entertainment, etc., access to the energy generated by mediums appropriate for that region, access to a global communication network more robust than the internet even, access to a global high-speed and efficient transportation network such as maglev evacuated tube systems. I mean, if you want to look into a lot of this sort of stuff, I'd recommend you look into ET3. That's Evacuated Tube Transportation Technologies. Just look at that thing. It's www.et3.com. Wonderful stuff. I mean, if only, it's the sort of thing where you start thinking, wow, I'd love to have this in the world, But yeah, look into that ET3. But coming back to the question, and most importantly for people in this kind of system, most importantly, the means to contribute towards, improve and express yourself within the planet Earth society that we have matured into becoming. And we become that by working on ourselves, by helping each other, by becoming scientifically literate and adopting those principles into more of our thinking and decisions, by learning to be more compassionate and self-governing. No one ever said such a task would be an easy one, but that doesn't mean that it's any less imperative. If you were stuck at home and your fridge and cupboards were empty and you were hungry, and you realised that there was a long and complicated route to the shop to buy more food, would you sit there and go, nah, sod it, I'll starve? No, you wouldn't do that. But anyway, question 10. How has becoming an activist and pursuing it affected your own life and the decisions you've made? Well, I'd say it's affected my life in a huge way. I mean, before I became an activist, I only really had hopes and dreams for average things attainable for a working class guy with no real amount of money. My worldview was curbed, I'd say. I mean, it was always trying to push for more, but it was always curbed. I mean, I knew the world didn't work the way it should, and I called out whatever faults I perceived in some vain effort that just doing that would inject enough sense into the world to change it for the better. Yeah, I was quite naive when I was younger. I mean, this was mostly because I had no discernible direction to advocate. I had all these jumbled ideas and principles and values, but no visualization of a future. This is very much like the larger grouping of all the ideas that most of culture has for positive social change. It's just jumbled ideas, no unification. But I mean, in Nathaniel Branden's book, The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, I mean, I'd recommend that anyone read that. You can get a hold of a copy. It's really, really interesting. But in that book, he refers to visualization of an end goal to be pivotal to the most effective means of achieving it in terms of a target. And that I think he says, you're unlikely to hit a target you can't even see. Alright, so when I first watched Zeitgeist Addendum and saw about a resource-based economy, that clicked in my head as a potential solution, and I had to do as much research as I could, not as much as I should have. I will admit, because to begin with, I was quite dare I say, fanatical, so I hadn't done as much research as I should, but over time I've done more and more and more, because I've cared about what's true and wanting to know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I had to do the research to familiarise myself with the train of thought and to better understand why it makes sense. If I couldn't explain it and show it to others why it can work, then I would be doing a disservice to activism in general. I mean, I remember it was probably only maybe a month or two after I'd first encountered this train of thought, and I was actually getting a tattoo, and in my naivety about this train of thought, not completely understanding it, I was trying to explain it to the tattoo artist, and he was able to just swiftly take down every single one of my points. And granted, because I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but I dare say some of them were probably not even logically sound, but because I didn't understand the train of thought well enough, I wasn't able to counter them. I think I just ended up saying, oh, well, I think it's a good idea anyway. Because, I was virtually clueless. I'd only just encountered it, and then I thought I could just bring it up in a conversation and everyone would be like, that's a good idea. No. You have to learn first. But this is one thing that not many people recognise and act upon. The fact that being an activist in the public eye, it can be a huge burden of responsibility in a way, because of how we're taught to judge ideas by the people who support and advocate them, even though that's not the best way, but a lot of us are taught that, and a lot of us do think that way in this culture. In that sense, we are acting as the representatives for new ways of thinking. That is only in the respect of being able to relate to those who are still stuck in groupthink, that being the mainstream consensus or zeitgeist, as it were. And then there's the alternatives, and in order for for an alternative to hold sway in the zeitgeist, it has to be relatable and compelling. But becoming an activist has taught me that I should care about the truth, and in the words of Matt Dillahunty, I prefer to believe as many true things as possible and as few false things as possible. I mean, this means that I can't just make blanket statements or unsubstantiated claims unless I've done my own homework and are in possession of the facts. So, I mean, it's so damn easy to just off the cuff blurt out any old thing that sounds like it makes sense but doesn't actually have any data backing it up. And if the people you're telling it to don't really think too much, then it's easy to convince them, because obviously they're the kind of people who won't really critique any kind of idea. They'll just take it on. And one thing that I've found as a good exercise in whether I'm adhering to these principles of knowing what the hell I'm talking about is when others have held me to those scientific principles. You know, if anything, you better have the facts on your side to save having egg on your face, you know. And of course, along with the tendency to avoid being full of shit, there's also another tendency derived from a scientific worldview, and that is admitting when you are full of shit, having the humility to learn from that, and allowing the new knowledge to replace the old. You know, and not having an ego about that, you know, because each time we find we are in the wrong, or more accurately, that a particular piece of information or opinion we are in possession of is shown to be inaccurate, then we are being elevated to a higher and more secure level of awareness. I mean, this dictates that being proven wrong, as it were, should actually be a point of celebration and education, and not shame and failure. In terms of an activist's own integrity and the integrity of any movement they hope to assist with, we have to unplug from groupthink in order to be able to consider new information and change along with it. You know, this is all part of the scientific literacy thing that we talk about. And I mean, this is something that even certain members of TZM have struggled with, and it's completely understandable. We're not, you know, in the system that we currently live in, we're not raised to be scientifically literate. We're not raised to be critical thinkers. We're not raised to question everything, you know. We're raised to support the system. And question 11, and I think this would probably be the last one that I will deal with on this particular podcast, but I will continue on with the next one because I've got quite a few more. But question 11, what's been the hardest thing in your activism? Well, dealing with the backlash from those around me who are either opposed to this new train of thought or dogmatically supportive of the current paradigm, I'd say. I mean, despite being an outspoken critic of the world around me from an early age and becoming accustomed to the position of being treated by many others as an outsider, I didn't initially understand exactly how much further this dynamic would take me in becoming an activist. You know, because before I was just critiquing little things that didn't really amount to much, but now I'm critiquing the entire system. You know, I mean, the stakes are raised, my friends, and to oppose the entire system, that puts a massive responsibility to work on yourself and how to communicate ideas if you wish to be taken seriously. You know, so you can imagine the kinds of ideological conflicts that I have endured with friends, family, co-workers, girlfriends, even perfect strangers. You know, I mean, over time, you realise that there's a strange paradox, as I've detailed before, in promoting a worldview that is truly social in scope and necessity, and living in the current paradigm that, as such, and as such, you're treated as though you're antisocial. You know, this is the nature of new and transforming ideas, and the backlash the established zeitgeist has to new ideas. I mean, especially ones that serve to bring humanity together in a better way of living. You know, the current culture will react to it as a foreign invader, even, which it kind of is in a way. I mean, since humanity has been taught for so long to consider the current way of life as the way it is, it will have that reaction. I mean, this is achieved by conflating society with the dominant values of the time. And to go against the dominant values is to go against society itself, and society itself is made up of people, and you don't want to be against people. So by this rationale, you can completely understand from the many acts of defence the zeitgeist itself erects. So from things like police in riot gear assaulting peaceful protesters, to all the way down to people doubting themselves and their place in society because they recognise the system's faults. So when explaining an NLRBE to people, I find sometimes I'm having to spend more time explaining what it isn't rather than what it is. You know, this can understandably cause more conflict because it seems like no ground is being gained for either cause. You know, it seems to just be just a raw debate going back and forth, when in fact, you know, ideas, it's easy to let ideas become a conflict, when in fact ideas, there's how it should be is that there's an exchange and a consideration, and then okay, well, I'll look into this. I've never really thought about that before. I mean, that's interesting. I like that. You know, when people consider, you know, that is how debates should be sounding. At points of contention, that is what a debate, or as I prefer, a discussion or a conversation or an exchange, that is how they should be sounding, instead of people raising their voice saying, no, that's not right, this is the truth. You know? When it becomes that's when things can become more fluid. But I mean, in these points of contention, it's really people are at an ideological impasse, and most political squabbling doesn't even come close to resolving that. You know, it's all about just arguing things more and more and more, and not really going anywhere. You know, even a lot of current events TV and radio programming, even if they're addressing a big issue, or maybe even a divisive issue, well, a lot of times a divisive issue, they just like present, this is what so-and-so says, but so-and-so says this. There we are, folks. Make of that what you will. And most people aren't really properly educated on these particular subjects to be able to deliberate for themselves. Even if they do have both sides, a lot of people don't really know how to think about a particular issue in order to be able to arrive at a conclusion. So that's why so much of this stuff just goes round and round and round, and it does cause all these conflicts. And I myself have struggled with it. You know, I have been dogmatic in the past, and I have been even fanatical, and I have got into shouting matches about things, and the hardest thing for me is being able to step back, because I've never really had all those particular insights into things like nonviolent communication and effectiveness of communication to really start internalizing that. I've been rather sort of like, get the best information and present it. That way you don't have to deal with other people thinking that you're wrong, because you create such a good argument that everyone's just like, yeah, brilliant, yeah, I'll go for that. But that's not the way how information interchange works. That's how it would work in a utopia, I suppose, if there were such a thing. I mean, that's the perfect scenario where you just present a point and the person goes, you know what, you're right. But it doesn't work that way. There can be a lot of conflict there, and it has, for a lot of people in my life who will know there will be no chance that they will listen to this podcast, maybe, but people who I've had in my life that have, me and them have gone separate ways because I'm a determined advocate of a sustainable direction, and maybe it didn't relate to them, and maybe goes completely against what they believe, or maybe they perceived some sort of insult when there even wasn't one. I mean, that's one thing that you will find every now and then as an activist. People will assume that you're attacking them just so they have the excuse to be to dodge the topic that's being addressed and make it about you insulting them. It's sort of like the reverse of the ad hom, and if they're successful in doing that, then, and if you're not on top of making sure that the topic doesn't get derailed, then you can easily start suffer the conversation immediately going about you trying to reassure them that you didn't insult them, and by then they're like, no, this is what I want to believe anyway, and you're not gonna change my mind. This is my opinion. I have a right to my opinion, and it just goes to shit. And I've had sort of like whole relationships with people that was basically one big drawn out conflict, ideological conflict. And people say, "Oh, you're offensive," and you need to get with the real world, and it's so easy to get in those kind of conflicts. And I'd say one of the hardest things I've had to deal with is being able to, as much as possible, engage in the correct way instead of being reactive and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, one of the hardest things I've had to deal with is doing my best to maintain compassionate connections with those in my life and those who pass through my life, despite ideological clashes. I try my best, I mean, I've lost a fair few people along the way, and tensions with those still in my life can be strained from time to time. I mean, for example, I have some family members who are fairly religious, and being around them can be trying, since I value critical thinking and skepticism. So it can be trying. It's very, very easy to start launching into different ideas and different sometimes there can be a need to prove people wrong, to sort of show off knowledge and say, hey, look at me, I'm right, you're wrong. It's very easy to fall into those kind of tendencies. That's why they have to be outmoded, along with other things that don't work and don't help us. We need to be shedding those and replacing them with things that help. Not just things that just work, but things that also really help, And but yeah, that's the long, arduous journey that I've had, being able to maintain those relationships despite having all those clashes. But anyway, that's the end of this podcast, because it is starting to get a bit too long. Where this podcast has been brought to you by Desert Island Digs. It's the new real estate approach that links together different desert islands so you can actually live on them. But if you go to www.didiggs.com, you can find out more information about it. Click the little button that very much looks like a boob, and enter the code name Adam2015, and you'll be added to their VIP list to get the first sort of peek at their new locations that they acquire, I suppose. This podcast was also brought to you by my trusted triad of sponsorship, providing the points of preservation for this podcast so it can come to you free of charge every single month. My current configuration of the triad is Russell Brand, Caroline Lucas MP, and Sir Patrick Stewart, and they've agreed to co-fund this podcast in return of, at the end of their period of sponsorship, to come onto the show for at least 10 minutes to discuss science and sustainability when applied to society. So the best thing to do is, really thank these individuals. I mean, I give out my heartfelt thanks to these individuals for sponsoring this show. And for those of you who are around who enjoy this, feel free to smoke signal, email, text, tweet, whatever you got to do. I tweet them to thank them. But yeah, thank these individuals for sponsoring the show. The more people that actually thank them, the more likely they will be to come onto the show and discuss this with me. And also the usual plug is for the Zeitgeist Movement Defined. For those of you who want to know exactly what it is that the Zeitgeist Movement advocates, it's in a real extensive and comprehensive form, in book form. It's if you want to get hold of it, go to www.thezeitgeistmovement.com/orientation. If you want to get hold of like a physical book at a very small cost, you can order that there through, I think it's Amazon, Lulu.com, I think. But if you don't want to pay for it, you can download a PDF of it for free. That way you can put it onto any tablet devices or whatever. But that's this podcast, I'm afraid. I hope that anyone who submitted questions that I did answer today, I hope they were satisfactory. If not, send me another one. Send me a reiteration of a question, even if you just want to bother me again with a question. Actually, no, don't do that. I mean, maybe I'll answer sort of like similar questions like once every year, because at least then you'll see the progression of my knowledge in answering them. But anyway, thank you very much for listening, guys. And not sure exactly what I'm going to have for the next one. I think I might be having an interview with a particular person from the London chapter. I met at the London chapter. I can't be entirely sure whether I'm going to be able to get it sorted for then, but I will be letting you guys know. So thank you very much for listening, guys. I hope you out there have a wonderful time. Be sure to get ready for the Zeitgeist Media Festival, either if you can host an event yourself, or even maybe arrange some sort of screening in your living room where you all watch the live feed of the main event in, I think it's going to be in Los Angeles this year. I think it's in Los Angeles. Well, I'm sure there's going to be live feeds of different events, especially the main event. But yeah, get ready for that, man. But anyway, take care, guys, and I hope you all have a wonderful life.